Hello everyone, please press subscribe, press follow, press the bell so you don't miss any new clips. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Author by Flying Alone. Audio novels by Novelist. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 61. The First Prince has arrived. I am Ling Han. Ling Han stood up, offered a faint smile, and then sat back down. Was that all? Ling clan. Which great clan was that? Everyone was very curious. There was no Ling clan in the 8 great clans of the imperial city. Could it be that the Ling clan was a great clan from some other city? That was possible, because there were 36 great cities in Rain country, and there was a number of great clans in each city. That brought the total of great clans in the whole country to over 100. Who could say with certainty that they knew all of them? However, the most surprised was definitely Xuanhuan. He was the only one who knew Lu Yutong's real identity. To be able to have a princess of the Lu clan wait upon him, what kind of colossal existence could this Ling clan be? Whatever it was, he still had to maintain a good relationship with Ling Han. Xuanhuan was an expert at manipulating the mood, and very quickly, everyone's attention was again focused on him. There was a round of laughter in the main hall, as everyone felt that this prince really had a unique charm, causing many of them to be of a mind to swear loyalty under his banner. Announcing the arrival of the first prince. It was at this very moment that a loud shout was heard from outside. The first prince has arrived. Everyone was extremely shocked. Who didn't know that the first prince and the fourth prince were currently embroiled in a fierce competition for the king's position? Why had he suddenly come here? Fourth brother. Very soon, the first prince appeared at the doorway of the main hall. He was a very handsome man in his 30s. He had a tall and sturdy figure with an exceptional bearing. He was all smiles as he took great strides towards Xuanhuan, looking nothing like a rival or enemy of the latter. Xuanhuan stood and walked forwards to greet the first prince. He was also all smiles as he said, "Eldest brother, what are you doing here?" When the two of them neared each other, they both tacitly stopped their advance. They both watched each other with smiles, yet neither had any intention of extending their arms to embrace the other in greeting. My fourth brother is hosting a banquet. I, as the eldest brother, must of course come to show my support, the first prince said, smiling. Xuanhuan could not help but frown slightly at this. The reason he was hosting this banquet was to gain the will of the people to gather support for when he ascends to the position of the king in the future. There was no way that the first prince did not know this. Then the reason he was here was obvious. He was here to ruin things for him. Then I'll thank you, eldest brother, he said in a very false manner, though his face still wore a dazzling smile. The first prince paused, and said, I've also brought a noble guest with me. Oh, and who might that be? Xuanhuan asked. He knew that the first prince would not have come just to show his face. The latter would definitely have a more substantial move planned. Brother Guo, please, the first prince called in the direction of the doorway. Everyone turned to take a look at the first prince's noble guest, and saw a young man in grey walk in. He was of medium height and his features were very ordinary, but when they saw the badge that hung on his chest, there was a slight change in all of their expressions. Yellow-grade medium-level alchemist. Alchemists were an existence that would be welcomed anywhere, as well as an existence that no self-respecting party could lack. If a party possessed the aid and support of an alchemist, then to individual cultivators, or even smaller powers, this party would be very attractive as an ally. Martial artists were too dependent on alchemical medicines. Fourth brother, let me introduce to you. This here is Guo Dingquan, Brother Guo, and he's a yellow-grade medium-level alchemist. And Brother Guo's master is even more impressive. He is the one and only Grandmaster Xuanmu, who has been acclaimed as one who excels in both sword skill and alchemy. The first prince wore a dazzling smile, and was feeling very cheerful. On the other hand, Xuanhuan felt a bitter taste on his tongue. He knew that the first prince was here to ruin things, and unfortunately, it seemed like he was going to succeed. The fact that Guo Dingquan was a yellow-grade medium-level alchemist was not the main point. The crux of the matter was that his master, Xuanmu Changfeng, was an actual black-grade low-level alchemist. Although currently, the first prince was only close with Guo Dingquan, but a disciple could also in a sense represent the master's partiality. The first prince was issuing a signal to everyone. He had a very good relationship with Xuanmu Changfeng and has obtained the latter's support. This definitely added a very heavy bargaining chip to his pile, while also being a very heavy blow to Qi Yongyi. The weight of an alchemist was too much. "Brother Guo," Qi Yongyi said in greeting, still maintaining a wide smile. He could not chase the first prince and Guo Dingquan away, or rumors would definitely spread, saying that he was a petty character. As a person who was seated in the upper echelons of society, he definitely had to present himself as a generous man. If he couldn't do even this small thing, then what right did he have to inherit the position of the king? Guo Dingquan was very arrogant. Even towards the fourth prince's greeting, he only replied with a "hm." He was really displaying an all-out arrogance and pride of an alchemist. This profession was really too scarce, so all alchemists were treated with utmost respect and as a result, completely spoiled. "Brother Guo, please sit." Qi Yongyi was secretly angered, but still displayed a very polite demeanor. Guo Dingquan's eyes swept over the scene, before walking forwards in a straight line. If he was sitting, then he was naturally going to sit in the first row. Otherwise, how could he preserve his pride? Because all the tables here were arranged 5 in one row, and there was not much of a gap in between tables, so on both sides, there was a very wide aisle. So, Guo Dingquan could only choose to walk up the left aisle or the right aisle. The unfortunate thing was that he chose to walk straight up the left aisle, and arrived at Ling Han's table, but whether or not it was because he had spotted Lu Yutong, that was something that only he himself knew. "You can get lost now," he said coldly. How overbearing. The first thing he said upon opening his mouth was to tell someone else to get lost. Did he really think he was the emperor? However, he himself was a yellow-grade medium-level alchemist, while his master was a black-grade alchemist, so he really did have the confidence to be so overbearing. Ling Han smiled. In the eyes of others, this meant that he was apparently going to give in to Guo Dingquan's overbearing demand, but Lu Yutong knew that it was the exact opposite. Ling Han was angry. Not only that, he was very angry. He said, "Why don't you try saying that again? Get lost. Get lost. Get lost." Guo Dingquan naturally did not feel scared of this subtle threat. He not only said it again, he even emphasized his demand 3 times. A coldness flashed through Ling Han's eyes. In an instant, his hand flashed out, taking hold of Guo Dingquan's neck. With a harsh Targano ping, Guo Dingquan's face was instantly pressed firmly onto the table. The shock wave of his face meeting the table caused the wine jar to topple over, and immediately, wine splashed all over his face. Guo Dingquan was firmly pressed down onto the table, and he started struggling vigorously, intending to get out of Ling Han's hold. Yet it was all pointless effort. The main hall was dead silent. This guy was really too great, he even dared to hit an alchemist. Everyone sucked their breath in shock. He had balls, he was a real man. The first prince was initially startled, before suddenly erupting in fury. He never imagined that someone would actually dare to beat up Guo Dingquan. Initially, his aura had completely overwhelmed Qi Yongyi, but with this show of force, Guo Dingquan was not the only one who had lost his face. He was also embarrassed. He strode quickly towards Ling Han and his right hand flashed out, intending to grab onto Ling Han's neck, shouting, "I command you to release him." Chua. A strong wind blew past, and Lu Yutong had already acted, blocking the first prince's action. The first prince was stunned by her beauty at first, but immediately his gaze regained focus. Everything could be sacrificed for the king's position, and Guo Dingquan was a trump card that decided whether or not he could defeat the fourth prince, thus he could not allow any problems to emerge. "Step down," he shouted. He did not counterattack immediately because he did not want to harm such a beautiful maiden if he could avoid it. Lu Yutong only gave a wave of her hand, and said, "Get lost. Get lost." She actually told the first prince to get lost. She was indeed extremely daring. When Qi Yongyi saw this, he could not help smiling. He was the only one who knew that Lu Yutong was a noble daughter of the Lu clan. If the first prince offended her, that was definitely not anything good for him. But while this would be a bad thing for the first prince, for himself, this would be a good thing indeed. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 62. Leaving in Anger. Get lost. With a casual wave of his hand, Guo Dingquan was easily flung away by Ling Han, and with a peng, he crashed into the nearest wall. Bastard! Guo Dingquan got back to his feet and shouted in a towering rage. He was really about to die from his utmost fury. As an alchemist, someone who was respected and revered by everyone, he had actually been pressed onto a table, wine had splattered all over his face, and he had even been flung away to crash into a wall. Thankfully, dinner had not been served yet. Otherwise, his face would have been even more colorful, decorated by a myriad of dishes. You want to try it again? Ling Han asked coldly. This was not the first alchemist he had thrashed, and definitely wouldn't be the last. I want you to die. Guo Dingquan roared furiously. Teng, teng, teng. With heavy steps, he charged over to Ling Han again. As an alchemist, he had never experienced such great shame. If he did not avenge himself, then he could not live with himself. Ling Han moved. Peng, Guo Dingquan was once again held by his neck, and as expected, slammed onto the table face first. The difference was that Ling Han had used more strength this time, causing the table to be broken in half by the force. Veins were protruding all over Guo Dingquan's face in his anger, and his eyes looked like they were about to spit out fire. However, he did not charge a second time, because he had finally sensed that the gap between Ling Han and himself was far too wide. Damn it, based on aura, Ling Han could only be about the same level as he himself was. At most, they were both in the fourth layer of element gathering tier, but why was he so strong? He turned his head to look at the first prince. The latter was stuck in a confrontation with Lu Yutong, so could not possibly assist him at this time. He raised his voice and said, "Whoever helps me thrash this brat, I will gift him with 10 embracing origin pills." What? Embracing origin pill? For anyone below the 9th layer of element gathering tier, this is a valuable treasure. It can help one in the formation of the origin nucleus and increase the chances of success by about 30%. To give out 10 pills in one go, what opulence! Everyone was discussing this spiritedly, but there were not many who were really interested in taking up Guo Dingquan's offer, because who amongst those invited was not a genius? For a genius, if they even had to depend on external support just to form their origin nucleus, what right did they have to the name of genius? When Guo Dingquan saw this, he could not help grit his teeth and finally announced, "An earth and fire pill." Damn, an earth and fire pill. This time, everyone could no longer just stay in their seats calmly. Even Qi Yongyi and the first prince seemed tempted by this new offer. The earth and fire pill had similar effects as the purple origin pill. It was also used to help a martial artist break through to the gushing spring tier, but its effects were much weaker than the latter. At most, it could only raise the chance of success by 20%. But still, it was a very rare and extremely valuable spiritual medicine. Even for a genius like Qi Yongyi, he also had been stuck at the peak period of the 9th layer of element gathering tier for over half a year. Normally, if one could manage to break through to gushing spring tier within 3 to 5 years' time, that was already a feat worthy of praise. Meanwhile, the first prince had already reached the peak period of the 9th layer of element gathering tier 7 years ago, yet his cultivation level remained unchanged even until now, showing the extreme difficulty of breaking through to the gushing spring tier. An earth and fire pill could very possibly save quite a few years' time of cultivation for even a genius, so it was extremely valuable. However, although the ingredients required for the concoction of an earth and fire pill were not as costly as the ingredients for a purple origin pill, they were still extremely rare, and while there were many willing to buy, none were willing to sell. Otherwise, with the financial resources available to the royal house of the Da Yuan king, they would have been able to afford a few of them. As a result, everyone immediately turned to stare feverishly at Ling Han, as if he himself was an earth and fire pill. What impudence! Where do you people think this place is? Qi Yongyi immediately spoke coldly. He was a man that knew what his role was, so he naturally suppressed the covetousness he felt in his heart. Guo Dingquan was working for the first prince, so he of course would not bother to assist the former. Moreover, Ling Han had an unknown relationship with Lu Yutong, and with this, his position was extremely clear. He'd help Ling Han. With this exclamation from the fourth prince, everyone immediately regained their composure. This was the residence of the fourth prince, and if they dared to come to arms here, then in a sense, it was no different than rebellion. Guo Dingquan breathed heavily and glared at Qi Yongyi fiercely before suddenly turning around and leaving. There was no way that he could swallow this great offense. He was going to fetch his master. No one could insult an alchemist in this manner. Brother Guo! Brother Guo! The first prince hurriedly called as he chased after Guo Dingquan's heels. As sudden as the two's arrival was, they left just as suddenly. There was a temporary calm in the main hall. Some of the guests felt sorry for missing out on an opportunity to obtain the earth and fire pill, while some other guests were curious about the future development of this matter. Come, replace the table. Qi Yongyi began to manipulate the atmosphere and once again displayed his personal charm, causing the atmosphere of the banquet to regain its liveliness. All of them were extremely interested in Ling Han. It was not difficult to restrain Guo Dingquan. In fact, 80% of the people present here would be able to do so easily, but to dare to do so, perhaps only Ling Han possessed such courage. Brother Ling, may I know where do you originate from? Someone finally asked. Great Cloud Town. Ling Han had no intention of concealing it. After all, since he was intending to participate in the Da Yuan tournament, he could not falsify his identity. Great Cloud Town. All of them gave a start at this. Wasn't that a small place under the jurisdiction of the Da Yuan city? Then where did Ling Han get his confidence from? He was not the only one who had made a great display of power, for even the girl beside him appeared to be very proud. She had not even taken the first prince seriously. Qi Yongyi was even more surprised. Ling Han came from Great Cloud Town. Then how had he developed a relationship with Lu Yutong? Even though he himself was of nobility, when compared to Lu Yutong, there was still a bit of a gap between them. After all, they could only be considered as one of the branch families of the imperial family, and after so many generations, their relation with the imperial family was not really very close. Unless he could ascend to the position of the Da Yuan king, even he would not be qualified to marry Lu Yutong. Yet Ling Han could have Lu Yutong follow closely by his side. A brat from a tiny little grey cloud town, what right did he have to do such a thing? As the various dishes were served, everyone too felt slightly famished and so began eating. Martial artists expended a lot of energy, and so would become hungry more easily than normal people. Ha 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 ha, apologies, apologies. Fourth prince, I've arrived late. A long bout of laughter was heard and a tall, young man walked in. He appeared to be about 20 years old, and had an astonishing aura to him. The third son of the Jin clan, Jin Wuji. Jin Wuxiang followed right behind, imitating the former's steps slavishly. He seemed a bit like a mouse that had seen a cat, and there was absolutely no sign of his prior arrogance. Brother Jin, why are you so late? Qi Yongyi asked, smiling as he stood. I had some trifling matters to deal with, Jin Wuji said, as he continued to walk forwards. Elder brother, that's him. That's him. When they arrived at the first row, Jin Wuxiang immediately called out, as he pointed at Ling Han. Jin Wuji's eyes swept over the first row, and could not hold back an expression of shock from appearing on his face, as he said, Yi, younger sister disciple Lu, what are you doing here? He was also a disciple of Huyang Academy, so he naturally recognized the princess, Lu Yutong. Lu Yutong only nodded back calmly and did not make any further response. Jin Wuji knew her personality, so he did not take her cool response to heart. His gaze turned towards Ling Han, and coldness flashed through his eyes immediately. Initially, he had only been a little late, But when he encountered his younger brother at the entrance and found out what the latter had experienced, he immediately ordered someone to investigate Ling Han. This was not difficult. Since he had already registered, there would definitely be a profile of him in the records. A mere young master from a tiny clan of Grey Cloud Town, and he actually dared to oppose the Jin clan. He definitely did not think that Lu Yutong would actually deign to like Ling Han. Even if she did, the Lu clan would definitely not agree to such a match. This would practically be a great dishonor to the clan. As a result, he did not fear that Lu Yutong would defend Ling Han. Moreover, his power was above Lu Yutong. "Brat, get lost from my seat," he said coldly. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 63. Damn, hit the wrong person. Ling Han could not withhold a smile from turning up at the corners of his lips, and said, "Are you sure you want this seat?" "Heng, this was originally my seat," Jin Wuji said coldly. "Very well, since you want it, then I'll just let you have it." Ling Han stood up very candidly. "Pooh." Quite a few people exclaimed in surprise. Because there really was too big a difference between what Ling Han was doing now and what he had done just now. Previously, Ling Han had even dared to thrash the disciple of someone who excelled in sword arts and alchemy openly in front of the first prince. Yet, now he was actually scared off. It was inconceivable, it was really inconceivable. They were not the only ones who thought it was inconceivable. Lu Yutong was in complete bewilderment. Ling Han had left a very distinct impression on her. Though he may appear to be utterly calm, he was prouder than anyone else. How was it possible that he would give in to Jin Wuji's demand? If they really had to battle, she was adequate enough to face Jin Wuji. And even if the Jin clan stepped out and interfered, didn't he still have the colossal existence of Heaven's Medicine Pavilion behind him? In the whole of Rain Country, what party would dare to offend Heaven's Medicine Pavilion? None. There were definitely none. Because this huge power did not only exist in Rain Country, but also possessed branches in the 9 countries in the desolate north, so whether it was in terms of power or wealth, it had a terrifying amount of both. Just think, when martial artists cultivate, they would definitely need the support of alchemical pills, and Heaven's Medicine Pavilion was a place where alchemical pills could be sold, so how could there be a lack of elite martial artists willing to act on their behalf? From the reverence and respect Zhu Hixin felt towards Ling Han, he had practically recognized the latter as his teacher. If the Jin clan dared to harm Ling Han, he would definitely unleash the power of the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion branch of Rain Country and obliterate the Jin clan. Since the facts were as so, then why would he need to fear? Ling Han stretched out an arm and drew Lu Yutong to himself. An enchanting blush instantly appeared on the young girl's beautiful face, and there was absolutely no hint of the icy beauty from before. Damn. When they saw this dazzling, extraordinarily beautiful maiden, everyone was filled with such irrepressible jealousy that their eyes turned red, wanting nothing more than to chop off the arm Ling Han was holding Lu Yutong with. Lu Yutong's mind had completely blanked. She only felt as if she was walking on clouds, and when she followed Ling Han to sit in one of the tables at the row further behind, even though Ling Han had long withdrawn his arm, she still had not regained her senses. Her heart was still rapidly beating. "Just wait and we'll see a good show," Ling Han said softly by her ear. Lu Yutong froze at this, and said, "What good show?" Ling Han pouted a bit, and said, "Don't forget that Guo something from just now had gone to get reinforcements." "You're planning to trick Jin Wuji." Lu Yutong finally understood. Ling Han smiled and said, "I've already asked him if he really wanted that seat, and he himself agreed to it, so what does that have to do with me?" Lu Yutong could not help pursing her lips in a delicate smile, but immediately frowned, and said, "Juanmu Changfeng couldn't be that hot-headed, right? I bet he has already restrained a whole stomach's worth of anger from yesterday, and when that Guo whatever returned, he'd definitely exaggerate the story, thus the old man's wrath would definitely be extraordinarily large. Moreover, when I was thrashing that Guo whatever, I immediately acted without saying a single word." Ling Han laughed and said, "So, there is a high possibility that the old guy would do something like that." When that Juanmu Changfeng realizes that he has punished the wrong person, he would definitely focus on you. Lu Yutong's delicate brow wrinkled in a frown. I think that, by that time, Zhu Hixin and Zhang Weishan will have already arrived. However, even if they have not, I have my own ways of dealing with that old man. Ling Han revealed a confident smile, for Zhu Hixin had told about Juanmu Changfeng to him. The old man was praised as one who excelled in sword arts and alchemy, and the sword technique that he practiced was sweeping cloud sword arts, a black-grade low-level martial arts technique. 1. However, the old man only managed to learn 7 moves, while the complete sweeping cloud sword arts had a total of 9 moves. The book of sword arts techniques that the old guy managed to get his hands on should be a partially ruined relic, which was why he had not managed to learn the last 2 moves. Coincidentally, Ling Han possessed the complete sweeping cloud sword arts, so no matter from which angle one looked, he had the upper hand in the upcoming confrontation. Lu Yutong has definitely been badly influenced by Ling Han, and she could not withhold an expectant look from appearing on her face. Because of Ling Han's lack of moral backbone, all of the guests felt shame for sharing his company, thus no one else spoke to him. Meanwhile, Jin Wuxiang turned his head repeatedly, displaying a challenging expression to Ling Han. From his expression, he had clearly held disdain for Ling Han as well. He had originally thought that Ling Han would be stubborn, and in that way, his elder brother would definitely have an excuse to heavily injure Ling Han. He had never thought that the guy was the type to bully the weak while fearing the strong. But, do you think that you'll be able to escape just like this? Jin Wuxiang humphed coldly in his heart. Once the banquet ended and they had left the residence of the 4th prince, Jin Wuji would definitely act and ruthlessly teach Ling Han a lesson. They still had to give face to the 4th prince. Ling Han's capitulation was something that even Qi Yongyi had not thought would happen, so he too grew disdainful of Ling Han. As a result, he did not bother to waste any more time on Ling Han, and went on with his original plans, starting to persuade the other guests in hope that everyone invited would agree to support him. Master, that's him. Not long after, a voice filled with fury was heard. Guo Dingquan had once again appeared at the entry to the main hall, and he was pointing inside. Everyone turned around at this, but they only felt their eyes blurring as a figure flew past with a terrifying speed. It was an old man dressed in a grey robe, with a sword on his back. His figure flashed by and soon appeared next to Jin Wuji. He then stretched out a hand, took hold of Jin Wuji's neck and fiercely pressed it down. Peng! The power behind this move was extremely large, and it had broken the table into 2 halves. By now, the dishes and wine had all been served, so instantly, the wine and gravy from the dishes had all splattered onto Jin Wuji's face. This was an uninvited calamity, definitely an uninvited calamity. How could Jin Wuji have imagined that someone would actually dare attack him? Moreover, his attacker was so overwhelmingly powerful that he didn't even have the ability to defend himself, and in such a confusion, suffered this kind of calamity. Ha 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 ha, you were so arrogant, why don't you try being arrogant again? Guo Dingquan had raced over, and aimed a few kicks on Jin Wuji's behind. His whole face was twisted in fury, as if he wanted nothing more than to commit murder. Jin Wuxiang was initially startled, before shouting, "Why are you beating him up?" He felt very wronged. Because, all this while, the Jin brothers were always the ones who bullied others, yet today, his elder brother had actually been thrashed by 2 people they had never even met before. He didn't even manage to react in time due to shock. Guo Dingquan took one glance at him, and only felt that Jin Wuxiang was a completely unfamiliar face. It was not the icy beauty from before. Still, he did not take this disparity to heart, and only continued to kick Jin Wuji furiously. The people involved in the confrontation each had their own side. One side had misunderstood while the other side was stuck in a complete daze, but others immediately came to a realization Guo Dingquan had brought his master who excelled in both sword arts and alchemy, Juanmu Changfeng, yet had hit the wrong target. Poor Jin Wuji, he was painfully thrashed for no reason. At this moment, he had to be feeling extremely gloomy. No wonder Ling Han had yielded the seat to Jin Wuji just now. Apparently, he had already planned to lay a trap for him. Damn, this guy was really too devious. When they saw that Jin Wuji was still being thrashed while Jin Wuxiang seemed to be at a complete loss, quite a few people could not hold themselves back from laughing out loud. Moreover, the laughter was getting louder and louder, and finally spread to all the others as everyone held their stomachs and laughed raucously. Guo Dingquan too finally realized that something was wrong. He turned Jin Wuji to face him, and when he saw the unfamiliar face that was completely splattered with wine and gravy, he could not help giving a start and said, "Who are you?" "Pooh." Jin Wuji instantly spat out a mouthful of blood in anger. "You don't even fucking know who I am, then why did you beat me up? And you had thrashed me so ferociously, even. Who had he actually offended? No matter who you people are, I will definitely have you pay the price." He roared in fury. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 64. Effortlessly controlling the situation. This is not the person who had thrashed you. Juanmu Changfeng was also startled, as well as slightly displeased. Since this wasn't the guy, then why the heck did you point at this guy the moment you came in? No. Guo Dingquan was also very depressed. Since you're not Ling Han, then what the heck were you doing sitting here? He looked at Jin Wuji and asked, "Where is the person who had been sitting here before?" Jin Wuji was not a fool, so he immediately realized. He had fallen into Ling Han's trap. This brat had offended these two people, and coincidentally, he had demanded for the brat to relinquish his seat to him. As a result, the brat took advantage of the situation to lay a trap for him, causing him to suffer horribly. That damned little beast. Ling Han, he roared loudly, "Get out here, I'm going to kill you." Ling Han. When Juanmu Changfeng heard this name, killing intent instantly appeared in his heart. This was the name of the junior who had caused him to sustain extraordinary loss of face. An old fox like him of course immediately realized that both he and Jin Wuji had been played by Ling Han. Sure. Everyone's eyes turned to look at Ling Han. Ling Han was sitting upright, and even with so many people focused on him, he did not feel the slightest bit nervous. He took a sip of wine, and could not help recollecting that in his last life, all the wines he had drunk were the best quality wine. It was definitely not something this so-called excellent wine could be compared to. For the moment, Jin Wuji had no intention of getting his revenge on Guo Dingquan. Moreover, the latter had Juanmu Changfeng with him, and this was a powerful warrior of gushing spring tear whose prowess was stronger than his own by who knows how many times. He looked at Ling Han, his hands tightly gripped into fists. Gravy and blood had spilled from his wounds due to being smashed into the table covered his face. His appearance was ferocious and twisted, it could practically scare kids to tears. "Ah, you've played us," Jin Wuxiang called out, pointing at Ling Han. He had finally realized the truth. Ha 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 ha. Quite a few people could not hold themselves back from laughing aloud. So the saying held true: though a dragon has 9 sons, each of them are different. This Jin Wuxiang was a complete idiot. It didn't even seem that he and Jin Wuji could have come from the same father and mother. "You are indeed extremely daring," Juanmu Changfeng said darkly. He actually dared to manipulate even himself. Looks like this little junior was really tired of living. Seeing Juanmu Changfeng speak, Jin Wuji immediately fell silent. Obviously, the former also had some kind of conflict with Ling Han, and this man was in gushing spring tear, and his status was far higher than his own as well. Even if he intended to get his own revenge, he would have to wait for his turn. Juanmu Changfeng took great strides towards Ling Han, his eyes cold. He had already decided, even if Zhu Hixin and Zhang Weishan both came, he would still not spare this insolent junior. Guo Dingquan followed closely, a cold smile upon his lips. This brat dared to trick even his master. He was really dead this time. Juanmu Changfeng did not walk very fast, but every step he took caused the whole main hall to shake slightly, showing the towering rage that this man, one who excelled in both sword arts and alchemy, was currently feeling. Even Qi Yongyi, as the 4th prince, dared not speak up in defense of Ling Han at this moment. What was Ling Han going to do now? His move just now was indeed very beautiful, managing to trap and trick two of his enemies simultaneously. However, no matter if it was Xuanmu Changfeng or the Jin clan, neither was a party that could be offended without harsh consequences. Everyone felt extremely curious about his next move. Ling Han did not look at all like that kind of fool. Lu Yutong immediately stood, and assumed a defensive stance in front of Ling Han. However, she was immediately pushed lightly aside by Ling Han. Ling Han only said calmly, "The four winds rise, clouds in the heavens thrown into disorder, the tiger and crane both appear, creating invincibility." Xuanmu Changfeng's advancing steps paused, and he looked as if he had been struck by a lightning bolt, wearing an expression like he had just seen a ghost. But after a short moment, he immediately looked very excited, so much in fact that even his body began shaking. This was the verbal chant for the 8th move of the Sweeping Cloud Sword Arts. The Sweeping Cloud Sword Arts was a black-grade medium-level martial arts technique. He had learned it from a secret scroll he had obtained from an ancient site. Unfortunately, due to the long passage of time, the parts showing the last two moves had completely deteriorated. There was only a verbal chant as well as an illustration for the 8th move, but there wasn't even a name for the 9th move left behind. The reason why he could afford to not take Zhu Hixin and Zhang Weishan seriously was because he possessed the Sweeping Cloud Sword Arts. The three of them were all in the 3rd layer of Gushing Spring tier, but because of the Sweeping Cloud Sword Arts, even if Zhu Hixin and Zhang Weishan joined forces, they would still be no match for him. But it was precisely because this sword arts technique was so powerful that he desired to obtain the last two moves even in his dreams. Thus, when Ling Han recited the verbal chant from Sweeping Cloud Sword Arts, how could he not be excited? You know it. Xuanmu Changfeng said, his voice stuttering. Naturally. Ling Han nodded. Will you teach me? The old guy's face was filled with expectation. Ling Han smiled, and said, that will depend on your performance. Xuanmu Changfeng did not even spend any time to consider, and said, whatever request you have, just say it. Whether it is alchemical pills, or resources for cultivation, I can give them to you. See. Around them, everyone was at an absolute loss. Just now, Xuanmu Changfeng seemed like he would stop at nothing in his desire to kill Ling Han, so how come his attitude changed so drastically? Was this some kind of magic trick? Master, Guo Dingquan had become anxious. What kind of demonic magic had this brat used? Ling Han pointed at Jin Wuji and his brother, and turned to point at Guo Dingquan as well, and said, these three guys, they are unpleasant to my eyes. Very well. A very experienced man like Xuanmu Changfeng of course instantly understood Ling Han's meaning. He did not say another word before he lifted up Guo Dingquan in one move and in a flash arrived in front of the Jin brothers. His left hand gave a shove, and a very powerful, irresistible force caused the two Jin brothers to fall down onto the floor. Peng 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 peng, Xuanmu Changfeng kicked and punched, ravaging the three as much as he liked. Everyone else was completely dumbfounded. Ling Han had just said a few words that sounded like some kind of verbal chant, and Xuanmu Changfeng actually became Ling Han's underling, obeying his commands. Admiration for Ling Han had risen in all of them. Whether it was Guo Dingquan, the Jin brothers, or even Xuanmu Changfeng, they had all been played, being in the palm of his hand. The Jin brothers were completely depressed, the depression sinking into their very bones. What great enmity or conflict did they have with Xuanmu Changfeng? Previously, they had been thrashed by this old man for no reason, but that could be explained by it all being a misunderstanding due to Ling Han tricking them both. But what about this time? But since a powerful warrior of Gushing Spring tier had made his move, what else could they do other than obediently suffer the thrashing without complaints? Qi Yongyi's face was twitching all over. Since the moment he saw that Ling Han had Lu Yutong accompany him, he already knew that this guy was definitely not ordinary, but to be awesome to such an extent caused even him to experience a great shock. Xuanmu Changfeng was not just a warrior of Gushing Spring tier, he was also a black-grade low-level alchemist, being slightly well-known in Rain Country. Even if a powerful warrior of spiritual ocean tier met him, the former would be extremely courteous and polite. But now, to put it in a coarse manner, what difference did he have with being Ling Han's underling, simply doing as the latter commanded? What happened to the dignity of an alchemist, or the moral integrity of a warrior of gushing spring tier? However, if he maintained a good relationship with Ling Han, did that mean he would be able to take Xuanmu Changfeng under his own banner? The first prince was so excited just from being able to befriend Guo Dingquan. If he managed to attract Xuanmu Changfeng to his side, then his position would be incomparably steady, and no one would be able to stop him from inheriting the king's position. And thus, when Zhu Hixin and Zhang Weishan arrived at a later time, they saw such a scene. Xuanmu Changfeng was thrashing his own disciple and the Jin brothers as if he had gone mad, while the person they were supposedly here to rescue, Ling Han, was leisurely sitting, drinking wine and eating. What kind of game were they playing here? Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 65. Summoned by the Da Yuan King. Guo Dingquan and the Jin brothers felt gloomy to the extreme. For Guo Dingquan, master beating up his disciple was the same as a father beating his son, a law of nature, so how could he even think of avenging himself? If he did, that would fall into the crime of ingratitude and cheating his own master, and wherever he fled to, he'd be pointed out by every man. Meanwhile, the Jin brothers knew that the old man that had thrashed them was the one who excelled in sword arts and alchemy, a person who possessed extremely high status. Even when the Da Yuan King met him, he'd still treat the latter with utmost courtesy and politeness, so even if the older generations of the Jin clan found out about this matter, they would still definitely not seek vengeance for them. Which means that they had suffered this thrashing for absolutely no reason. Ling Han. The three of them gritted their teeth in fury. The chief culprit behind all this was Ling Han, and he had become the object of their utmost hatred. Young friend Ling, are you all right? Zhu Hixin and Zhang Weishan had raced over, anxious expressions on their faces. I'm fine. Ling Han shook his head with a smile. Of course he's fine, everyone else thought. He played a trick on both the Jin brothers and Xuanmu Changfeng, and now even Xuanmu Changfeng was listening to his every command. How could he possibly not be fine? However, when they saw the two alchemists arrive and present an overwhelmingly polite demeanor towards Ling Han, they could not control their lips from twitching, and everyone was becoming even more curious about Ling Han's actual identity. Who was this guy? The heartbeat of the fourth prince had quickened as he decided to spare no effort to pull Ling Han into his own support camp. If he managed to obtain the support of three alchemists through Ling Han, then what else did he have to fear from a Milu clan? The position of the Da Yuan King would definitely fall to him. Ling Han did not intend to stay any longer in this place, and so turned around to depart. Xuanmu Changfeng, uncaring of his own face, followed behind him to Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. He still had to ask Ling Han for the verbal chants and illustrations for the last two moves of the sweeping cloud sword arts. Regarding this matter, Zhu Hixin and Zhang Weishan were both very shocked. They had never thought that Ling Han not only had a terrifying level of achievements in terms of alchemy, but possessed extraordinary understanding even in the field of martial arts, so much that he could even guide Xuanmu Changfeng, who has been praised as one who excelled in both sword arts and alchemy. Ling Han did not go back on his word. Upon their return, he taught the missing eighth move of sweeping cloud sword arts to Xuanmu Changfeng. As for the ninth move, he would of course not immediately teach him that last move to avoid Xuanmu Changfeng abandoning his benefactor after reaching his goal. At the very least, he would wait until he himself had broken through to the gushing spring tier. By that time, there would be no harm to teach him the ninth move. Anyways, this was just a black-grade medium-level martial arts technique, and for Ling Han, it was completely unimportant. Xuanmu Changfeng apparently understood this as well, as he excused himself shortly after obtaining the verbal chant and illustration for the eighth move. Whether he managed to get the ninth move or not would depend on his future performance. When he returned to his room, Ling Han very quickly fell asleep, and Ling Dongxing had completely no idea how big a commotion his son had created that night. None of those who had the qualifications to be invited to the fourth prince's banquet were mouthy idiots, so the news about Ling Han had only spread around in a very small circle. Early morning the next day, a servant from the royal house of the Da Yuan king arrived at Heaven's Medicine Pavilion, saying that the Da Yuan king had invited Ling Han over for a meeting. The Da Yuan king wanted to see him. Ling Han did not have Lu Yutong follow him. He alone went with that servant to the royal house of the Da Yuan king. Very soon, when they arrived at the study, he saw this local overlord. The Da Yuan king was already 60 years old, but because he had a high cultivation level, he did not look old at all. On the other hand, his figure was tall and sturdy, and his whole body exuded a very powerful aura, displaying the atmosphere of a ruler. The sixth layer of spiritual ocean tier. Ling Han only took one glance, and there was no way for this man to conceal his cultivation level in front of his eyes. On the path of martial arts, every fourth and seventh layer was a different threshold. This Da Yuan king should have been stuck on this layer for a very long time. Greetings, Da Yuan king. Ling Han raised his clasped hands as a salutation. Rise. The Da Yuan king raised his hand, and said with a smile, youngsters nowadays are really impressive. Not only managing to reach the fourth layer of element gathering tier at such a young age, you even have 3 black-grade alchemists revolving around you. Even I have not had such an honor. The Da Yuan king had obviously already found out about the previous night's event. Ling Han laughed mischievously and said, I only have some slight academic attainments in alchemy, which allowed me to share a common language with Grandmaster Zhu and the others. Ed N. Academic as in theory. The Da Yuan king naturally would not believe Ling Han's words, yet he did not attempt to point it out bluntly. He only kept his extreme curiosity to himself, curiosity how such a genius had appeared within the area under his jurisdiction, and a genius that had 3 alchemists willingly revolving around him at that. Then what about that girl of the Lu clan? He asked with a smile. The issue about Lu Yutong couldn't be hidden from him either. If one is born handsome, he'd be popular everywhere, Ling Han said exaggeratedly. Ha ha, you. The Da Yuan king pointed a bit at Ling Han, as if reprimanding him for being too slick in his speech. He changed the topic swiftly and asked, whom do you think out of my 2 sons is more suitable to inherit my position? Was it appropriate to ask him this question? Ling Han smiled, and said, the 2 princes each have their individual merits. Who exactly is more suitable? I believe that Da Yuan king, your majesty, you have your own thoughts. Then what need is there for me to speak more on the subject? The Da Yuan king once again broke out into loud laughter as he thought silently, this slippery kid, his argument is watertight. He once again changed the topic, and said, I have one more daughter who has yet to marry. Are you willing to become my son-in-law? Damn, were all the people from the royal house of the Da Yuan king so direct? Previously, when he went to register himself for the tournament, the chief butler had also attempted some matchmaking on the spot. And now, this man, the actual father of the girl, was the same, as if he was in a hurry to marry off his daughter. Ling Han hurriedly waved his hands, and said, my heart is fully focused on martial arts, and within the next few years, I will not consider marriage. The Da Yuan king could not help feeling that it was quite a pity. Even Zhu Hixin, Zhang Weishan and Juanmu Changfeng treated Ling Han with utmost respect, so obviously this young man had terrifying ability in the field of alchemy. If the latter could become his son-in-law, then he would become an unimaginable aid to their family branch. But since Ling Han had already tactfully declined the offer, as a king, he could not be so shameless as to insist. Moreover, his daughter was beautiful, so it was not like there was no one willing to marry her. If you encounter any troubles in future, you may come and ask me for help. The Da Yuan king gave Ling Han a very heavy promise. Even if he could not manage to become Ling Han's father-in-law, he was still determined to maintain an affable relationship with this young man. Many thanks for your generosity. Ling Han accepted this favor with grace. After all, the current him was still too weak, so he still needed this kind of support and assistance. When he returned to Heaven's Medicine Pavilion, he discovered that the fourth prince had come to pay him a visit, and had been waiting for a very long time for his return. The fourth prince conversed with him for a very long time, but did not really say anything substantial. He was simply trying to maintain a good relationship with Ling Han. Obviously, the fourth prince knew that he was too weak to actually persuade Ling Han to join his ranks. As a result, it was only a relationship between two contemporaries, and the fourth prince didn't even hint that he intended to have Ling Han join him as an underling. On Ling Han's side, he did not mind having another friend, and so, the two of them naturally had a very delightful conversation. After resting one more day, the actual day of the Da Yuan tournament had finally arrived. The first thing on the agenda was to draw lots. After confirming the 50 seeded participants, the other participants would be divided into groups based on the lots they drew. They would be separated into 50 small groups, which would respectively ascend to their own tournament stage. Then the battle would begin, and the last person standing on the tournament stage would be one of the top 50 participants of this Da Yuan tournament, successfully obtaining a place of enrollment into Huyang Academy. 3. Ling Han had also obtained the place of a seeded participant, and this guaranteed that in the first round of battle, he would not encounter any opponents that were too powerful. Of course, no matter how strong his opponent was, he would still hold no fear. Big brother Ling, Li Hao and the others were standing nearby, waving at him. End of the chapter. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao will be read in 5 chapters for every Monday, Wednesday, Friday and Sunday. Please leave this sound novel and press subscribe, follow, and the bell so you don't miss any new clips as well. See you.